My husband and my mother-in-law coached my kids to say they were scared of me and then reported me to CPS. The night I came back home after 18 months away, my suitcase felt heavier than it should have. Not because of the clothes or the cheap souvenirs I picked up on my days off, but because every step up the front walk felt like I was sneaking into someone else's house. The porch light looked different, the curtains were not the ones I left, and even the little plant by the door that I used to baby on weekends was gone. I had this stupid fantasy on the plane that the kids would run to the door when they heard the car, that my husband would meet me on the porch, that we would have that dramatic movie moment where everyone talks over each other and cries and laughs, and the neighbors roll their eyes because it is all too loud. Instead, I opened the door with my own key and walked straight into the smell of someone else's cooking, and a voice that was definitely not mine, shouting from the kitchen that dinner was almost ready. My son was on the couch, half buried in a blanket, eyes glued to a game on his tablet. He lifted his gaze just enough to see me, said a soft, "Hey," that sounded more like a question than a greeting, and went right back to tapping the screen. My daughter was at the table with my mother-in-law, doing some kind of craft with glitter and glue. She looked up, froze for maybe half a second, then stood and hugged her grandmother like a tiny rocket launching into orbit. When she finally turned to me, the hug she offered was this stiff, polite thing, like what you give a neighbor you barely know. I put my suitcase down by the wall because I honestly did not know where to put it anymore. There were new shoes lined up by the door that did not belong to my kids, new frames on the wall, new furniture in the living room, a rug I had never seen, and out the front window, a car in the driveway that was not ours while our old one was shoved to the side like an afterthought. My husband came out of the hallway rubbing his eyes like he had just woken up from a nap. He did not run. He did not pick me up or kiss me or say he missed me. He just kind of nodded and said, "You made it." Like I was a delivery he was not sure would arrive on time. When I stepped forward to hug him, he let me, but it felt like hugging a coat on a hanger. No warmth, no squeeze back, just arms around a body that was somewhere else. My mother-in-law did not bother standing up. She stayed seated at the table, one hand on my daughter's shoulder, the other stirring something in a bowl like this was her kitchen now. 18 months is a long time to be gone, she said without even looking at me. The kids got used to a routine. I swallowed down about 10 different responses at once. I could have said that the routine she was talking about existed because I took a travel contract in another state to save our mortgage, because we were drowning in medical bills and late fees, because my husband's hours had been cut and somebody had to do something. I could have said that every night I cried in a tiny rented room 3 states away, convincing myself this sacrifice was worth it so my kids would always have a house to come back to. Instead, I said the one thing that came out without passing through my brain first. "I missed you," I told the kids, and my voice cracked so hard I wanted to bite it back. My daughter smiled, but it was small and weird, like she was checking someone's reaction behind me before she committed to it. "Grandma made chicken the way we like it," she said, as if that answered anything. My son did not even look up from the tablet. I offered to make dinner the next night, trying to move us into something that felt like normal, something where I was still allowed to be the mother in my own house. My husband shrugged. "Sure," he said, eyes already sliding away from me. "If you are not too tired or whatever." I was exhausted, but not from the trip. Tired from the way my own house suddenly felt like a place I needed permission to stand in. Still, the next evening, I put my bag in our bedroom, changed out of my scrubs, and went straight into the kitchen like I used to do after late shifts. I cooked the dish the kids always begged for before I left, the one they called Mom's Special Pasta, even though it was not special at all, just noodles and sauce and a ridiculous amount of garlic bread. They sat down, looked at their plates, and my son frowned. "It tastes different," he said after the first bite. "Grandma does it better." My daughter nodded like they had rehearsed it. "Yeah, Grandma's is not so, I do not know, weird." She pushed the food around with her fork. My mother-in-law watched from the other end of the table, her expression neutral in that way that is not neutral at all. My husband ate in silence, eyes on his plate, chewing like he was trying not to taste anything. When we finished, he took his plate to the sink without a word and drifted to the couch, grabbed a pillow, and lay down like that was just his thing now. I stood in the kitchen with a dish towel in my hand, listening to the hum of the dishwasher and the low drone of the television, waiting for him to come back to our bed. He did not. He fell asleep out there under the light of the screen, while I lay awake in a bedroom that had new pillows and a different comforter and a nightstand I did not recognize. The next morning I woke up early, partly because my body was still on travel schedule and partly because anxiety has its own alarm clock. I started coffee, started breakfast, tried to pretend this was normal. My daughter was at the table doing homework while my son scrolled through his game. My mother-in-law hovered by the counter, giving herself a second cup of coffee like she lived there. My father-in-law came in from the garage complaining about some project he and my husband were doing with the new shelves. New shelves I had not approved, not that anyone had asked. When my daughter spilled her juice all over the table, it spread like a small orange sea under her notebooks and my mother-in-law's phone. I jumped up, grabbed some towels, and snapped, "Can you please pay attention to what you are doing?" My voice came out louder than I meant. I was tired. I was jet-lagged. I had been home for less than 2 days and felt like a guest in a hotel that hated me. My husband moved so fast he almost tipped his chair over. He pulled our daughter toward him like I had thrown a knife at her instead of a sentence. Hey, he said, putting his arm between us. Relax. I froze. He was looking at me like I was dangerous. My daughter clung to him like she thought so too, even though all I had in my hand was a wet towel. My chest burned in that way where you can either start screaming or start crying, and neither option is helpful. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my mother-in-law fiddling with her phone on the table, the camera angled just a little too high for someone reading messages. She kept glancing up, back down, up again. The screen was on. Little red dot in the corner. My stomach dropped. I told myself I was being paranoid, that sleep deprivation was making me see things, that nobody would actually film me for raising my voice once. I wish I could say that was the last time I ignored that feeling. For the next few days, the kids took every little problem straight to their grandmother. A missing sock, a loose tooth, a broken toy, a question about homework. They used to yell for me without thinking. Now they barely seem to remember I existed unless I walked directly into their line of sight. Every time my daughter came near me, she looked over her shoulder like she was checking if someone was watching. My son flinched when I brushed hair out of his eyes. The school called at the end of the week. While I was at the hospital trying to reorient myself to a unit that had changed software twice since I left, the receptionist asked me to confirm my address and then casually mentioned they had updated the emergency contact for the kids. "We have your husband as the only primary now," she said. "We tried your number earlier, but it was listed as secondary and marked as inactive." I stepped into the medication room and closed the door, heart pounding. "Inactive?" I repeated. "I am their mother. My number is not inactive." "Sorry," she said. "We just follow what the parents submit on the forms." He came in last month. Last month, while I was still away, sending half my paycheck home so we would not lose the house, he had gone to their school and quietly erased me from the first line of contact. I was still thinking about that when an unfamiliar sedan pulled up in front of our house that afternoon, and a woman in a blazer stepped out with a folder in her hands. She introduced herself as a social worker, showed me a badge, and asked if she could come in to talk. My husband came to the door, putting on a face that looked so concerned and tired I barely recognized him. "We had a report," she said, sitting on the couch that used to be ours and now belonged to this strange new version of my family. "About instability, possible emotional volatility, maybe some physical risk. We take every report seriously, especially when children are involved," she added, explaining that this was an initial home visit, not a final judgment, and that her job was to assess and recommend, not decide everything on the spot. Instability, volatility, physical risk. The words landed like stones in my lap. My husband did this thing where he stared at his hands like he hated that this was happening, but also did not fight it. "I just want everyone safe," he said quietly, not looking at me. "She has been under a lot of stress. I thought maybe she needed help." The social worker pulled out her tablet and tapped a few times before turning it toward me. "We received some videos," she said. "We are required to review them." There I was on the screen, standing in the kitchen in my scrubs, saying, "Can you please pay attention to what you are doing?" Except in the clip, it looked like I was towering over my daughter, and the audio was turned up so high that my voice sounded twice as harsh. There was another clip of me dropping a bag of groceries and cursing when a jar shattered on the floor, cropped so you could not see that the glass had cut my hand. Another shot of me sitting on the edge of my bed with my head in my hands while my daughter cried in the hallway because she did not want to go to school. It looked like I was ignoring her. The part where I went to hug her a minute later was missing. "I know how this looks," I said, trying not to panic, "but this is not the whole story." The social worker nodded like she had heard that sentence 1,000 times. "That is why we do a full evaluation," she said. "For now, I am recommending that you and your husband consider some space while we assess. Maybe you could stay somewhere else temporarily just until things settle." She called it a voluntary safety plan, not a court order, but it still felt like a label I could not peel off. My husband seized on that like it was a lifeline. I told her that might be best, he said. She has been so tired. Maybe she just needs time. I looked at him, at the house, at my kids hovering in the hallway like scared animals, at my mother-in-law standing behind them with her phone clutched in her hand. Time, I repeated. Right. He did not ask me to stay. He did not fight for me in front of this stranger who was deciding who was safe and who was not. He just stood there and let the word unstable hang between us like smoke. So that is how I ended up packing a suitcase again, but this time I was walking out of the house I had worked so hard to keep. I took some clothes, my nursing license, my phone, and whatever dignity I could scrape off the floor. My daughter hugged me the way you hug an aunt you see twice a year, quick and polite and already moving away. My son gave me this odd little wave, eyes darting toward his grandmother. My mother-in-law hugged me at the door, pressing her lips theatrically to my cheek. You just take care of yourself. Dear, she said, the children need stability. I almost laughed. I almost screamed. Instead, I walked down the steps, got into my car, and drove away from my own life, while the social worker watched from the sidewalk. The first thing I did after I stopped crying long enough to see straight was pull up to an ATM and check our joint account. I already knew the answer in my gut, but I needed to see it with my own eyes. The balance that used to give me panic attacks because it was always flirting with zero now gave me a different kind of panic because it was basically empty in a whole new way. Months and months of travel pay, all those double shifts, all those holiday shifts I traded so other people could be with their families while I FaceTimed mine from a sterile apartment. Gone. The statements showed big withdrawals labeled as home repairs and transfers to my in-laws' account, payments for a new car, charges to stores for furniture and electronics. A couple of big cash withdrawals with no note at all. I leaned my head against the steering wheel and laughed in that little hysterical way that hurts your chest. 18 months of being the bad guy who left her kids, and they had taken every cent I sent. I found a room in a cheap boarding house near the hospital, the kind of place where the walls are thin and you hear snippets of other people's lives, whether you want to or not. Families laughing over dinner, a couple arguing in the next unit, someone's television too loud. I sat on the edge of the narrow bed, staring at my phone, trying to decide if I should call my kids. When I finally tried a video call, my son answered and held the phone at a weird angle, so I could see mostly the ceiling. Hey, buddy, I said, forcing a smile. How are you? Busy, he said. I have to go. I heard my mother-in-law's voice in the background say his name sharply, and then the call cut off. I wanted to throw the phone across the room. Instead, I went to my night shift at the hospital and tried not to fall apart on my patients. I did okay until a colleague from nursing school, now a part-time lawyer and full-time overachiever, came in for some labs on her lunch break and found me in the staff room staring at my coffee like it had personally betrayed me. She took one look at my face and asked, "Who died?" "My marriage, probably," I said. And then everything just poured out of me. The travel contract, the in-laws moving into my house, the weird distance with the kids, the videos, the social worker, the empty bank account. I did not plan to say all of it, but once I started, I could not stop. She listened without interrupting, just sipping her drink with that focused expression she always had when we were cramming for exams. When I finished, she leaned back and let out a slow breath. "You are describing textbook alienation," she said, "plus financial abuse." "I am describing my life," I said. "Alienation sounds like something that happens to other people on a talk show." "Yeah, well," she said, "other people do not have a friend who passed the bar because she was too stubborn to stay in one career. I can help, but you have to give me everything. Bank statements, access to any shared devices you can still get your hands on. Anything that might show patterns." "I am broke," I reminded her. "They took everything." She shrugged. "I am not doing this for a bonus. We can work out payments later. Right now you need a strategy, not a spreadsheet full of crying emojis." I laughed even though nothing was funny. "You really think I can fight this?" "I think," she said, "that if they are bold enough to stage videos and drain accounts, they are probably sloppy somewhere. People like that always are." She told me to bring her any old phones or tablets the kids might have left in my car or in the house before I left. I said I did not have anything, and then I remembered the ancient tablet that used to live at the bottom of the toy box, the one they had given up on because the battery died every 5 minutes. "Check your trunk," she said. "Check under the seats. Check that closet where you dumped everything the week before you left. I know you. You do not throw electronics away. You hoard them like trophies." She was not wrong. There was no restraining order, no piece of paper actually keeping me out of that house, just that so-called voluntary plan and the shame of it. After my shift, I drove back to the house while everyone was at school and at work. My key still worked. My in-laws' car was gone. The new car was gone. The place felt like a showroom with all the new furniture and none of the life. In the hall closet, behind a stack of coats and a box of holiday decorations, I found the old tablet wrapped in a scarf, the one we used to keep in the living room for homework and games and that everyone in the house borrowed without thinking about logins. I charged it in my tiny room at the boarding house until the battery could hold more than 10 minutes, and then I turned it on, half expecting it to explode or show me cartoons from 3 years ago. Instead, it greeted me with my husband's email already logged in. He had used it to check his messages and never bothered signing out. The cloud storage icon sat right on the home screen, full and unbothered. I took it straight to my friend's small office downtown, where she plugged it into her laptop like it was a patient in need of resuscitation. "Let us see what secrets you are hiding," she muttered. It took a while. There were hundreds of files, most of them boring family photos, school newsletters, kid videos of pets and toys. Then we found a folder labeled with my kids' initials and a date from about 3 months before I came home. Inside that folder were videos. In the first one, my son sat on the edge of his bed looking miserable while my husband knelt in front of him, holding the tablet up. A woman I did not recognize at first stood in the corner of the room, half in frame, half out, arms crossed. "Say it again," my husband said gently. "Use the words we talked about." My son looked straight into the camera with eyes that seemed older than they were. "I feel scared when my mom is around," he recited. "She yells a lot and throws things." The woman in the corner shook her head slightly. "More feeling," she said. "Remember how we practiced? Think about the noise, how it bothers you." He tried again, her voice guiding him through the lines like they were rehearsing for a school play. In video after video, the kids repeated phrases about me being unstable, about being nervous when I walked into a room, about preferring to be with their grandmother because she was calm and safe. Sometimes my husband would stop them and say, No, use the other word," and the woman would suggest something stronger. Frightened instead of nervous, terrified instead of uncomfortable. In one clip, the woman walked closer to the camera, and I finally saw her clearly. She was maybe a little younger than me, fit, with a ponytail and a bright smile that did not match the ugliness of what she was doing. She wore a shirt with a logo from a local gym. She laughed when my daughter got the line right and said, "Perfect, try it again, just like that." My friend paused the video and zoomed in on the woman's face. "I have seen her," she said. "She posts nonstop on a social app about training clients, posting gym selfies with motivational captions." I barely heard her. My eyes were on my kids, my babies, sitting there and parroting words someone else had fed them, twisting normal kid moments into horror scenes. I recognized some of the phrases. They were the exact sentences my daughter had used with the social worker. The same emotional beats, the same fake tremble in her voice. The oldest videos were from months before I came back when I was still out of state. They had been practicing for a long time. I felt sick. I felt furious. I felt stupid for not seeing it sooner. "The timestamps matter," my friend said, pointing at the dates. "These are from before any so-called incident they reported." "That is huge!" "Also," she clicked into the cloud account and pulled up the sharing history. "They sent some of these to your in-laws and to that woman's personal email. They have been coordinating this like a group project." I stared at the screen, at my husband in his familiar t-shirt with his hand on our son's back, looking so gentle while he coached him to say he was scared of me. "Why?" I whispered, even though I already knew the answer. "Money, control, punishment for leaving to work." My friend swore under her breath. "Because if they can paint you as unstable, they can keep the kids, keep the house, and keep your income flowing toward them. It is not subtle. It is not even smart. It is just cruel." We downloaded everything, backed it up twice, printed out logs and timestamps. She started drafting an emergency motion before I could even fully process what we had. As she typed, she asked me questions about my contract, about how much I had sent home, about when the in-laws moved in. "You realize," she said without looking away from the screen, "that they have been living off you like you are an unlimited card. You are not a partner in this to them. You are a resource." Hearing it out loud like that was worse than watching the videos. At least the videos had the decency to look as ugly as they were. We filed the emergency petition for visitation and a review of the original complaint. The court moved faster than I expected, probably because nobody wants to be the judge who ignored a nurse with evidence that her kids were being coached on camera. At the first hearing, I sat at a long table in a cold room while my husband and his parents sat on the other side. He avoided my eyes. My in-laws did not bother. My mother-in-law stared at me with this smug little satisfaction that made me want to leap across the table. which obviously would have been the worst possible choice. The judge watched the edited videos the social worker had brought first. Me with the raised voice. Me looking like I was ignoring a crying child. Me dropping groceries and cursing. My friend whispered that it was ridiculous that this had even been enough to trigger such a strong reaction, but it was what it was. Then the judge watched the coaching videos from the tablet. The ones with my kids practicing lines. The woman from the gym tweaking their performance like a director. The room went so quiet you could hear the whirring of the air vent. "These recordings are from months before the alleged incidents?" the judge asked. "Yes, Your Honor," my friend said. "We have the cloud logs to prove it." My mother-in-law shifted in her seat. My husband finally looked up. The judge did not suddenly declare me Saint of the Year. That is not how this works. He did, however, say that there were serious concerns about manipulation and that a full evaluation was necessary. In the meantime, he ordered that I be allowed supervised visitation with the kids once a week at a family center, and that both parents attend a parenting course. It was not the instant justice I secretly hoped for, but it was a crack in the wall they had built around my children. The first supervised visit took place in this depressing center that smelled like disinfectant and stale crackers. The room had mismatched furniture and a couple of toys that had seen better days. A woman with a clipboard introduced herself as the supervisor and sat in the corner like a human camera. When my son walked in, he looked around like he was in a dentist's office. My daughter clung to her father's hand until the last possible second. He gave me this half nod and left them there with me like he was dropping them off at daycare. "Hey," I said, trying not to sound as nervous as I felt. "I missed you so much." My son shrugged and went straight to the toy shelf. My daughter sat on the far end of the couch, shoulders up around her ears. Every question I asked got a one-word answer. Every attempt to joke landed like a brick. When I reached for my daughter's hand, she flinched before forcing herself to hold it for a second, eyes flicking to the supervisor. At the end of the visit, when they were leaving, my son hugged me quickly and whispered, "Can I go home now?" In this way, that made it sound like I was a stranger who had kept him too long at a boring party. As they walked out, I noticed a thin gold bracelet on my daughter's wrist, something delicate and obviously expensive. "Where did you get that?" I asked. She looked at it and then at the door. "It was a present," she said, barely loud enough for me to hear. It is not important, but it was. It was one more thing my husband and his parents could dangle between us. One more shiny object to keep her anchored to their version of the story. Back at the boarding house that night, I lay awake listening to someone's television 2 rooms over and wondered how long it would take before my kids stopped looking at me like I was a dangerous stranger. I wondered if they ever would. While I was busy trying not to drown in supervised visits and court paperwork, my husband was busy playing hero on a social media app. A friend sent me screenshots of his posts, pictures of him making breakfast with the kids, captions about doing it all for them, how sometimes life forces you to be stronger than you ever thought you could be. People commented with heart emojis and little messages about what a good father he was, how lucky the kids were to have him. None of them knew he had kicked me out of the house with a social worker watching. None of them knew he had drained our savings. People only see what they are given, and he was feeding them a very specific menu. My neighbors, who used to wave when I left for night shifts, started avoiding eye contact when I came by to pick up mail or drop off paperwork. One of them literally turned around in her driveway when she saw me coming up the sidewalk, suddenly obsessed with checking the back of her car. The worst part, though, was when my father-in-law showed up at the hospital and asked to speak with human resources. He told them he was worried about my mental health, that I was unstable, that he did not want his grandchildren around me and was concerned about the patients too. He used all the right buzzwords. Stress, burnout, emotional episodes. My manager called me into her office, shut the door, and folded her hands on the desk. "There have been some concerns raised," she said carefully. "We have to look into them." I handed over everything I had. My performance reviews, emails from supervisors during my contract praising my work, documentation about the custody situation. I told her flat out, "My in-laws are trying to make me look dangerous so they can keep my kids and my money. I am not perfect, but I am not a risk to anyone." After an internal review, they concluded there was no evidence to support the claims, but the air on the unit changed. Some colleagues avoided conversations about my personal life entirely. Others treated me like I might break down at any second. One told me quietly in the break room that my husband's mother had cornered her in the parking lot and tried to recruit her to the concerned side. On top of everything else, I started getting statements in the mail for credit cards I had never opened, cards in my name with balances that made me want to throw up, charges for electronics, furniture, clothes for the kids, all matching things I had seen in my house. They had used my information to get lines of credit while I was away, spending like I was an endless fountain and leaving me holding the bill. My friend added each new statement to the growing file, her mouth a tight line. "We can contest these," she said. "It will take time, but identity theft is still theft even if it is family." At the next supervised visit, my son mentioned casually that the woman from the gym had slept over at the house a few times. He said it the same way you would talk about a babysitter or an aunt, totally matter of fact. "She makes pancakes," he added. "She puts chocolate chips in them. Grandma does not like that." I felt my face go hot. "Who told you to call her by her first name?" I asked, trying to sound neutral and failing. And he blinked. "Everyone. She is just around a lot." I did not push. The supervisor was right there, and anything I said could be twisted into me being jealous or unstable. But inside, something snapped. It is one thing to coach my kids to say they are scared of me. It is another to bring another woman into my house, into my children's lives, and pretend she is just part of the scenery while I got escorted out with a folder and a warning. Later that week, a coworker sent me a screenshot from that same social app. It was my husband, my in-laws, and the gym woman all at a restaurant, kids squished between them in the booth. Everyone smiling like a stock photo for happy blended family. The caption was something about finding your true support system, and how blood is not always thicker than water. The post was from 2 weeks before I came home. 2 weeks. They had been playing happy family with her while I was still clocking in out of state, calling home on my breaks to talk to kids who now I could see were already being nudged to see me as the outsider. Meanwhile, the college funds I had set up for the kids, tiny but growing, mysteriously vanished. My friend dug through the account and found that my husband had claimed a medical emergency and cashed out the funds. There was no emergency. There was a new car, new furniture, and withdrawals that lined up suspiciously well with restaurant receipts and shopping trips. The psychological evaluation the court ordered came back eventually. It said I was under stress but not dangerous, that my reactions were within normal range for someone in my situation, that there was no evidence of me being violent or unstable with the kids. It also said there were concerning signs of coaching in how the children talked about me, especially when asked open-ended questions. You would think that would be the end of it. It was not. The judge still wanted me to complete a 12-week parenting course before making any big changes. "It will show good faith," my friend said, "and it will not hurt. You will learn some things, even if you do not need half of it." The class met in a drab building with fluorescent lights and a coffee machine that produced something vaguely brown. I sat in a circle with parents who had actually neglected or hurt their kids, listening to them talk about their anger, their addictions, their mistakes. I did not feel better than them, exactly, but I did feel wildly out of place. I was there because someone edited my worst moments into a highlight reel and decided that made a story. During one session, I stepped outside on the break and sat in my car, sobbing into my hands for the full 15 minutes. I could not skip the rest of the class, though. If I missed too many sessions, it would be a mark against me. So I wiped my face, fixed my mascara in the rearview mirror, and went back in to talk about communication techniques while my life sat in a folder on some desk upstairs. Halfway through the course, my daughter's teacher called me. She said she was not supposed to pick sides, but she was worried. My daughter's grades had dropped. She was distracted in class. Her drawings almost never included a mother figure, and when they did, the mother was off to the side, smaller than everyone else. "She talks about her grandmother a lot," the teacher said. "She barely mentions you unless I ask directly. Then she gets quiet." At the next hearing, my husband sat on the stand and tried to keep his story straight, but under questioning, he slipped. He admitted he had known about some of the videos before the social worker came, admitted that his mother had suggested documenting interactions, that he thought it would help in case something happened. He dodged specifics, but the transcript did not lie. The judge's expression sharpened. "You understand," he said slowly, "that encouraging your children to rehearse negative statements about their mother is harmful, regardless of any marital conflict you might have." My husband mumbled something about being scared and wanting to make sure the kids were heard. I recognized the tone. It is the one people use when they know they have been caught and are scrambling to sound like they meant well. Not long after that, the gym woman showed up at a school talent show sitting between my husband and my in-laws, like she had always been part of the family. I had been allowed to attend only under the condition that I did not sit with them, so I watched from the back doorway, half hidden. My daughter kept glancing at the front row, at the gym woman, waiting for her nod before stepping on stage. At one point, the main account my paycheck went into got locked. The bank flagged it for suspicious activity. My husband had called them and suggested there might be fraud, listing a couple of deposits from my travel contract as questionable. He was trying to freeze me out of my own money again, this time through official channels. My friend called the bank, sent them copies of the contract, and got it resolved in 2 days. But the message was clear. If there was a button he could push to make my life harder, he was going to mash it. During another supervised visit, the supervisor asked my daughter a simple question about what she liked to do at home. My daughter started to answer, then stopped mid-sentence, eyes going sideways like she was reading from an invisible script and had lost her place. "You can just say whatever you want," the supervisor said softly. My daughter's little hands twisted in her lap. "I like it when Grandma reads to us," she said finally. "It is calm there." She said it in the exact tone I had heard in those practice videos, the same rhythm, the same careful enunciation. It made my skin crawl. About a week later, my husband requested a meeting with my friend. He showed up alone, holding a small flash drive like it might explode. "I cannot keep doing this," he said, not quite looking at either of us. "I brought something." On the drive were audio recordings of conversations between him and his mother, starting months before I agreed to take the travel contract. In one, she calmly laid out how they could use my absence to their advantage, how they could document moments when I was tired or snappy, how living with them would make it easier to say the kids preferred their house, especially if I came back different, how if they could get temporary custody and some kind of finding about my stability, they could argue that my income should keep supporting the house the kids lived in, which would conveniently still be their house. Listening to it was like being stuck in a nightmare where the villain narrates the plot out loud. In another clip, my husband hesitated. You could hear him say he did not think I was a bad mother, that I was just overwhelmed. My mother-in-law replied that love was not the issue, that stability was, and that if he did not act, the kids would suffer. She told him I had chosen money over family the moment I signed that travel contract. In one of the recordings, my mother-in-law was talking to the woman from the gym, thanking her for being such a steady presence for the kids and hinting that it would be good for them to have someone younger and more available around. The woman laughed and said she had always liked the idea of a ready-made family, like my life was a position she could just step into if I did not come back fast enough. Listening to them, it hit me that she was not there out of pure kindness, or because she accidentally got dragged into drama. She chose to stand on their side and help coach my kids to see me as the unstable one, whether she was sleeping with my husband or just enjoying playing the better replacement. "She will be gone so long she will not even know them," she said. "Better to rip the bandage off now." He kept those recordings. I do not know if it was guilt or self-preservation, but whatever the reason, now they were part of my case. At the next hearing, the judge listened to a few of the clips. The room felt smaller with those voices bouncing off the walls. My mother-in-law went pale. My father-in-law stared straight ahead. My husband looked like he wanted to disappear. "Why did you make these recordings?" the judge asked him. He swallowed. "At first I just wanted to, I do not know, have proof that they were the ones pushing this," he said. "I thought maybe if things went too far, I could show that it was not just me." "You still participated," the judge said. "You benefited from it." "I know," he said. "I was wrong. I panicked. I let them scare me into thinking she would leave and never come back, and that I could not handle all the bills. They said this was the only way to keep the kids in the house." Hearing him paint himself as a victim of his parents' manipulation made me want to scream, but I also believed parts of it. Not because it excused anything, but because it fit the pattern. He had always been someone who let other people drive while he sat in the passenger seat complaining about the view. The judge took a long time before speaking. When he did, he was careful, measured. He said that the court's priority was the children's well-being, that what had happened was deeply troubling, that for now he was granting me temporary primary custody with a review scheduled in 8 weeks. My husband would have supervised visitation, and my in-laws were to have no direct contact with the kids until further notice. There would be separate proceedings about the financial issues. I did not jump up and cheer. It did not feel like a victory dance moment. It felt like being handed a lifeboat after months of treading water. I walked out of that courtroom shaking so hard I had to sit on a bench in the hallway until the room stopped spinning. Picking the kids up to come live with me again was one of the strangest days of my life. I pulled up in my car, the one that still smelled faintly like spilled coffee and old fries, and they stood on the front porch with backpacks on, their father behind them, my in-laws watching from inside through the window, even though they were not supposed to be near. My son got into the back seat without looking at me. My daughter climbed in slowly, one hand still on the strap of her backpack like she might jump back out at the last second. The first 10 minutes of the drive were dead silent. No music, no jokes, just the sound of the turn signal and my heart pounding in my ears. "So," I finally said, my voice too bright. How was school? Fine, my son said. Okay, my daughter said. Riveting. About halfway home, my son cleared his throat. Are we staying? He asked. Like, for real? Yes, I said. This is home. You are staying with me. His shoulders dropped like someone had cut invisible strings. My daughter started crying quietly, wiping her face with the back of her hand like she did not want me to see. Did we do something wrong? She whispered. Grandma said everything was because you could not handle us. It took everything in me not to pull over and go back to scream at my in-laws until the neighbors called the cops. You did not do anything wrong, I said. Adults made bad choices. That is on us, not on you. They did not completely believe me yet. I could hear it in the way they stayed careful, in the way they watched my face like they expected it to change. Those first few weeks were rough. They had gotten used to a house where everyone tiptoed around certain topics, where gifts and treats showed up whenever feelings got too big, where my mother-in-law would swoop in with cookies or new toys the second anyone cried. I was not that kind of mother even before all this, and I definitely could not be now. I did not have the money. I also did not want to train them to manage emotions with sugar and distraction. My husband started therapy as part of his court order. He told me in one supervised visit that he was working on himself, like that might earn him points. I could tell he had learned some phrases in his sessions because he started saying things like taking accountability and understanding my patterns, but his actions still looked a lot like someone who was scared of making his mother angry. My in-laws were busy dealing with the financial side. The court ordered an audit of all the accounts they had access to, every transfer from my joint account to theirs, every withdrawal labeled as repairs, every charge on those credit cards. They ended up facing a civil order to pay back a pretty shocking amount. The people who used to hold court at their country club and church suddenly found themselves not getting invited to things. People they had known for decades stopped sitting with them at events. The church quietly asked them to step back from some of their volunteer positions while everything played out, which, knowing them, probably hurt almost as much as the money. None of that made up for what they had done, but I would be lying if I said there was not a tiny petty part of me that enjoyed hearing my mother-in-law was no longer welcomed as the queen of the potluck table. My friend helped me dispute the fraudulent cards. It took months, but eventually, with court documents supporting my claims, most of the debt was wiped. I rebuilt my finances slowly, one paycheck at a time, setting up an account that nobody else could touch this time. No joint access, no shared login. If my husband wanted to contribute to the kids' expenses, he could, but it would be through formal channels. The kids started seeing a therapist who specialized in children caught in the middle of messy custody situations. My daughter had panic attacks whenever someone raised their voice around her. My son wet the bed for months, ashamed and quiet about it. They both had a habit of looking over their shoulders when they spoke, searching for a camera that was not there. One night, my daughter blurted out at dinner, "Are you mad at Grandma?" I took a breath. "I am angry about some things she did," I said. "But this is not about you choosing sides. You are allowed to love people who hurt me. That is complicated, and it is okay to feel weird about it." She frowned. "Grandma said you were sick," she whispered. "She said the videos were so someone could help you." There it was. The story they had been told to make all of this make sense. The justifying script. "I was hurt," I said. "Not in the way she meant. I was tired and sad and far from you, but I was never going to hurt you. They did not trust that. That is on them." As part of the civil order, my in-laws had to sell the fancy car and some of the new furniture to pay restitution. The day I drove past their house and did not see that shiny vehicle in the driveway, I felt this strange mix of satisfaction and grief. It was all so unnecessary. We could have figured out the money together. We could have had them stay with us without turning them into landlords of my marriage. The final custody hearing happened about a year after I first walked out with a suitcase and a file folder. The judge reviewed progress reports, therapy notes, financial records. My husband's therapist submitted a letter saying he had made some progress, but still struggled to set boundaries with his parents, which is a polite way of saying he was still a grown man who jumped when his mother snapped her fingers. The judge granted me permanent primary custody with visitation for my husband every other weekend, unsupervised but with conditions about communication and no involvement from his parents. The in-laws were not given any legal visitation rights. If they ever wanted to see the kids again, it would be up to me and the kids, not them. People expected me to get back together with him at some point, I think. There is this weird pressure to turn every story into a redemption arc. He even asked me once after a visit if I thought we might ever rebuild. I stared at him across my own doorstep, the same one where I had walked out a year earlier. "You helped them take my children away," I said. "You let them turn our house into a stage. You spent money I bled for. You recorded my worst moments and never once said, 'Maybe we should not do this.' I am all for therapy and growth, but I am not signing up to be the reward at the end of your self-improvement course." He looked hurt, like I had slapped him. For once, I did not apologize for that. A few months later, my in-laws sent birthday cards to the kids. They put them in a big envelope addressed to me because the court order said they could not have direct contact. My hands shook when I opened it. The cards were full of guilt-laced messages, all about how much they missed the kids, how unfair everything was, how they hoped one day the children would understand the truth. I showed them to my friend, who advised me to keep them as evidence and not give them to the kids right away. I made copies for the file and then put the originals in a box on the top shelf of my closet. Maybe someday my kids will want to read them. Maybe they will not. For now, they do not need that extra layer of confusion. Life did not magically smooth out after the judge's final order. There is no point in pretending otherwise. The kids still had bad nights. My son still woke up sometimes asking if someone was going to come take them while they slept. My daughter still flinched when I raised my voice, even if it was just me yelling from the kitchen that dinner was ready. I still had my own triggers. If I saw a phone held at a certain angle, my stomach clenched. If someone at work mentioned being stressed and unstable in the same sentence, my chest tightened. I caught myself narrating my own actions sometimes, like, "I am just putting this down, not throwing it," even when nobody was around. That is what happens when you have been turned into a villain by the people who were supposed to be your support system. You start anticipating the next edit. Over time, though, the volume of all of that dialed down. The kids switched schools at my daughter's request. She wanted a place where nobody knows what happened, which broke my heart and made perfect sense at the same time. My son joined a little soccer team at the community center. The first time he asked me to come watch practice, it felt like someone handed me a new life in a paper cup. We built new routines, homework at the table while I cooked dinner, movie nights on the couch with a big bowl of popcorn, mornings where nobody had to tiptoe around a grandmother's mood. It was not perfect. Sometimes we argued. Sometimes I got snappy and had to apologize. Sometimes they pushed boundaries because they were kids, and that is literally their job. But gradually, the feeling that there was always someone watching, documenting, judging, faded. The cameras got replaced by conversations. The scripts got replaced by actual feelings. My husband kept up with therapy enough to satisfy the court and kept his visits mostly consistent. His relationship with the kids is still stiff, like he is their camp counselor more than their father. That is between them now. I do not interfere as long as he keeps my in-laws out of it and follows the boundaries the court set. People sometimes ask me if I think my in-laws will ever apologize. I doubt it. People who can plan a whole campaign to remove you from your own kids while living in your house do not usually wake up one morning and say, "You know what? That was wrong." They rewrite the story in their heads until they are the heroes. I cannot control that. What I can control is how much space they get in my present, which at this point is none. The real victory here is not winning in court, even though I will not lie. That part was satisfying. The real win is sitting at my own kitchen table, in a place I pay for with my own name on the lease, watching my kids argue over who gets the last biscuit, and knowing that this noise, this mess, is ours. It is being able to raise my voice once in a while without immediately looking for a camera. It is hearing my daughter call out, "Mom, can you help me?" And knowing she means me, not the woman who spent a year turning my family into a performance. It is tucking my son into bed and having him say, eyes half closed, "I am glad I live here now," like it is the most obvious thing in the world. I am not some inspirational story about resilience. I am a woman who went to work to save her house and came back to find her life repainted without her consent. I am flawed and tired and still figuring it out most days. But I am also the one who fought my way through their version of reality and dragged us back into something that looks like a life instead of a stage play. And if there is one thing I know now, it is this. If anyone ever tries to make you feel like you are replaceable in your own family, like your love is a line item in a budget they can reallocate, they are wrong. You are not a resource. You are not a villain in someone else's script. You are the one who gets to decide what kind of story this becomes from here. People sometimes ask me why I did not see it coming, why I agreed to leave for that contract, why I trusted that everyone would still be there in the same positions when I came back. Like I had just hit pause on my life. I used to get defensive and list every bill, every late notice, every night I lay awake doing math in my head. Now I just say, because I thought we were on the same team, and let the awkward silence sit there. The truth is, I ignored a lot of small things that now feel huge in hindsight. The way my husband always said it was my job to fix the money when things got bad. The way my mother-in-law called nursing a nice little side career, even though my paycheck kept the lights on. The way everyone assumed I would say yes when the hospital offered that travel contract, because of course I would be the one to go. If you had asked me back then, I would have told you I was doing it for us, for our future, for the kids. I still believe that part. What I did not understand was that some people are happy to let you sacrifice yourself for the team as long as they get to keep the trophies. There is this one memory that keeps popping up from before I left. We were at a family cookout in the backyard. My in-laws were talking with some neighbors about retirement and who would help them as they got older. I joked that at least they would have options, since my husband was their only child, and they had 2 grandkids who adored them. My mother-in-law laughed and said, "Oh, you will take care of us too. You are the responsible one." Everyone chuckled like it was a compliment. I laughed with them. Now, when I think about that, it does not sound like a joke. It sounds like a plan they had been quietly rehearsing for years. The first time the kids called me from their new school with some tiny good news, it caught me off guard. My daughter had gotten a good grade on a project. My son had scored a goal in gym class. They could have told their therapist, their father, their friends, but they picked up the phone and told me. It was not some grand emotional moment. It was messy, with background noise and half-finished sentences and my daughter talking over my son to correct his version. But it felt like a crack in that wall they had spent so long building between us. We still have hard days. There are mornings when my son drags his feet getting ready and mutters that things were easier at his grandparents' house, and it stings. There are nights when my daughter slams her door and says I am being unfair, and I hear my mother-in-law's tone coming out of her mouth. On those days, I have to fight the urge to take it personally. Kids weaponize whatever they have heard grown-ups say. It does not mean they fully believe it. Sometimes I lose my temper. Not in the way those videos made it look, but in the regular human way where you have asked someone 12 times to put their shoes away and you step on them in the dark. I snap. I raise my voice. I say something I wish I could take back. The difference now is that I own it. I go back, sit on the edge of their beds, and say, "That came out wrong. I am sorry. I should not have said it like that." I am not interested in pretending I am some perfect, endlessly patient saint. I just want them to see what taking responsibility actually looks like, without cameras, without an audience. My relationship with my job changed too. I used to see every extra shift as an opportunity, every out-of-state contract as a lifeline. Now I look at the faces of the nurses who sign up for those long assignments and I wonder what they are leaving behind and whether the people at home actually understand the cost. I am still proud of what I do. I still believe in it. But I am done lighting myself on fire to keep everyone else warm. I picked up a per diem shift in another unit recently just to cover some extra expenses, and one of the younger nurses was talking about maybe taking a contract in another city. She asked me what I thought. For a second, I saw myself in her. All determination and spreadsheets and faith that hard work would automatically equal respect. I told her to get every agreement in writing, to make sure any joint accounts were truly joint, not just handy funnels for other people's spending. To talk with her partner about expectations, not in vague, we will figure it out terms, but in actual sentences. Who will handle the kids? Who will handle the house? What happens if something goes wrong? And most of all, I told her not to let anyone guilt her for being away while still happily cashing her checks. She blinked, surprised by how serious I was. "Did something happen to you?" she asked. "Something almost ate me alive," I said. "But I am still here." People like to ask if I am going to date again. Like finding a new partner is some kind of badge that proves I am healed. The answer changes depending on the day. Some days I think maybe, eventually, when the kids are older and my life does not feel like a puzzle I am still trying to solve. Other days I look at my couch, my mismatched mugs, my quiet nights where nobody is secretly recording me, and I think, I am okay like this. If I do date again, I know what I will not tolerate. I will not blend my finances like wet paint. I will not hand over access to every part of my life just because someone promises they will protect it. I will not ignore the little tightening in my chest when someone jokes about me being the stable one, like it is a job description instead of a compliment. As for my in-laws, they live across town now, in a smaller house with fewer windows. I do not stalk their lives, but things get back to me. People talk. Apparently, they tell everyone that the courts were unfair, that I used my hospital connections to turn things against them, that one day the kids will learn the truth. Maybe they will. Maybe they will read those birthday cards in my closet when they are older and ask hard questions. When that day comes, I am not going to hand them a script. I am going to tell them what happened from my point of view and let them decide. They ask about their grandparents sometimes, but not as often as you would think. It comes in waves, after holidays, after school assignments about family trees. My daughter once asked if people can love you and still hurt you. I told her yes. She asked if that meant she had to forgive them. I told her no, not on any schedule but her own. If there is anything I wish I had heard from an adult when I was younger, it is that love without boundaries is not noble. It is just a slow leak that eventually empties you out. The last time my husband dropped the kids off, he stood on the porch a little longer than usual. He looked tired in a different way, like the weight he had been carrying finally belonged to him, and not just to the story his parents had crafted. He said his parents were thinking about moving to another state, starting over somewhere nobody knew them. "Do you think that is a good idea?" he asked. "I think that is their business," I said. "Just make sure you are not following them again without thinking it through." He laughed, but there was no real humor in it. "I did not think anything through the first time," he admitted. "That is one of the few things we agree on," I said. After he left, my son asked if he could invite a friend over that weekend. My daughter wanted to rearrange her room, move her bed away from the window because it made her feel too exposed. We spent the afternoon dragging furniture around and arguing about where to put the dresser. It was normal and boring and absolutely everything I ever wanted. I am trying to feed something else now, something quieter and less dramatic. The part of me that knows I am allowed to take up space in my own life. The part that understands my worth is not measured in hours worked or money wired home. The part that can look at my reflection and see more than the version of me they tried to capture in those videos. If you are waiting for some big cinematic ending, there is not one. There is no scene where they fall to their knees and beg for forgiveness. No moment where a judge bangs a gavel and declares everything fixed. Real-life endings are softer than that. Mine looks like a pile of laundry on the couch, a sink full of dishes, 2 backpacks by the door, and a calendar on the fridge covered in scribbles. It looks like my daughter rolling her eyes at me and then laughing when I imitate her. It looks like my son handing me a crumpled certificate from school and mumbling that he did not want to make a big deal out of it, even though he clearly did. It looks like me, sitting at the table with a cup of tea that I actually get to finish while it is still warm, filling out forms for a field trip and realizing that my name is at the top of every emergency contact list. For a long time, they tried to write me out of my own story. They turned me into a background character, a problem to solve, a threat to manage. I am not letting that happen again. If I am going to be exhausted, it is going to be from building a life that is actually mine, not from holding up a house where nobody wants me in it. I am done stretching myself thin for people who treat my love and labor like something they are automatically entitled to. I am still figuring things out. I still make mistakes. I still have nights where the whole story plays in my head, like a looping video I cannot turn off. But then my daughter will yell from the other room asking where her favorite hoodie is. Or my son will ask if I can drive him to practice early so he can kick the ball around before everyone else shows up, and I am pulled back into the present. This, right here, is the part nobody can edit me out of. This is the footage that never makes it into anybody's carefully curated version of events. It is just us, living, messy, loud, imperfect, real.